5 minutes into my investor pitch, the CEO cut my microphone. "I cannot listen to this nonsense," he barked. A thin wave of nervous laughter spread through the conference room. I calmly closed my laptop and stepped aside. Seconds later, the client's lawyer stood up. "Where is his voice?" the lawyer demanded. "He is the one who owns the rights." The CEO went pale. The investors stood, and then they walked out. But that was the future. That was the explosive end to Project Meridian, the $180 million acquisition. In the months leading up to it, if you walked past my office, you would not see the smoke, the fire, or the structural collapse. You would just see me, Bruce, sitting behind a triple monitor setup, sipping lukewarm green tea, scrolling through thousands of lines of contract language that would make a normal human's eyes glaze over. I am the Director of Rights and Strategic Licensing. It sounds like the kind of job title designed to make conversation die at a dinner party. But the reality is that I am the unseen architect of this entire corporate structure. I am the only person who knows how the building was constructed, which means I am the only person who knows where the foundation is weakest. We were 6 months deep into Project Meridian, a massive content acquisition deal intended to merge 3 mid-sized streaming libraries into one gigantic platform. Everyone saw the flashy headlines, the projected revenue, the subscriber growth. No one saw the grime. No one saw the thousands of fragmented copyright clauses, the territorial restrictions dating back to 1998, or the music sync licenses that expired if you looked at them the wrong way. That was my world. I was the one untangling a knotted ball of Christmas lights the size of the Atlantic Ocean. Every single asset we were buying, the films, the television shows, the back catalogs, had a poison pill clause embedded deep in its contract. A legal landmine that could blow up the entire acquisition if it was not neutralized with a specific, handwritten addendum. For 5 years, I was the sole designated technical steward, the only person who knew the codes and the procedures to defuse them. I found my value in that invisibility. I believed my silent, perfect accuracy was the greatest asset I could provide. If I remained invisible, I could not make an error, and I could not be questioned. It is funny how value is perceived in corporate America. They see the guy standing on the stage waving his arms, and they think that is the leader. They see the man in the corner reading the fine print, and they think that is the help. I am a detail man, and I have always struggled with the belief that I must stay in the shadows to maintain my professional integrity. The thought of being put on a stage, having my work scrutinized by people who do not understand it, triggers a deep-seated imposter syndrome. I know I built the system, but I fear the moment I have to defend it verbally. I fear being exposed. Then came Brad. Brad was our new CEO, brought in by the board because the previous one was too cautious. Brad was not cautious. He was a former investment banker who wore suits that cost more than my annual salary and smelled like sandalwood and unearned confidence. He did not know the difference between a mechanical license and a synchronization right, but he knew how to smile with all 32 teeth. The first time I met Brad, he walked into my office without knocking, sat on the edge of my desk right on top of a stack of sensitive non-disclosure agreements, and looked around like he was inspecting a janitor's closet. "So, Bruce," he said, mispronouncing my title immediately, "you are the compliance boy." I slowly took off my reading glasses, meeting his eyes. "I am the Director of Rights and Strategic Licensing, Brad." Right. Compliance, listen. I am looking at the timeline for Meridian. You have a 4-week review period flagged here for IP clearance. That has got to go. We need to close before the quarter ends. Chop it to 3 days. I stared at him. He was not joking. He was looking at a legal process that involved negotiating with state lawyers in 3 different countries, as if it were a DoorDash order he could just expedite with an extra $5. "Brad," I said, keeping my voice level, the way you talk to a toddler holding a knife. "If we rush the clearance, we inherit the liability, specifically master recording rights for the entire 90s catalog. If we trigger the change of control clause without the waivers, we lose the content but keep the debt. It is a 4-week process. Minimum," he laughed. A short, sharp, barking sound. "You people always see ghosts. It is a standard acquisition, Bruce. Do not overthink it. Just get it done. I want to announce this at the investor showcase next month." He hopped off the desk, wrinkling the NDS. and finger gunned me on the way out. Be a team player, M. We are disrupting the industry here. That was the moment. The opening shotgun blast. I sat there looking at the door he had left open, listening to the heavy thud of his loafers retreating down the hall. He did not care about the structural integrity of the deal. He just wanted to cut the ribbon on the building before it collapsed. He wanted the press, the bonus, and the glory. I looked back at my screen. Line 405 of the master agreement. In the event of a change in executive leadership prior to full ratification, all derivative rights revert to the original license holder, unless explicitly countersigned by the acting director of licensing. The acting director of licensing. Me, Brad, did not know that clause existed. He did not know that the entire foundation of his disruption was resting on my signature, which I had not given yet. He saw me as a speed bump. He had no idea I was the only thing keeping the entire bridge from falling into the river. I picked up my tea. It was cold. I drank it anyway. If he wanted to play chicken with $1 billion, I was not going to be the one to swerve. My professional integrity demanded accuracy, and his actions represented a gross betrayal of that principle. He had forced the conflict. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Sears Insurancy. After Brad's impossible demand to rush a 4-week clearance into 3 days, the retaliation was swift but subtle. It did not happen all at once. It was a slow, suffocating drift, like carbon monoxide filling a room. Brad's goal was not to fire me outright, which would have triggered immediate legal alerts, but to render me irrelevant. First, it was the meeting invites. The weekly strategy sync meetings, which I had attended for 5 years, suddenly dropped off my calendar. When I asked Brad's executive assistant about it, she gave me a pitying look, the kind one gives a dog about to be put down. She said, "Oh, Brad feels those meetings should be strictly for revenue, generating leadership." Then she added, with a forced cheerfulness, "He said he will loop you in if there are any paperwork questions." Paperwork. That is what he called the meticulous legal framework that kept us from being sued into oblivion. He had reduced my entire profession, the structural integrity of $1 billion deal, to an administrative annoyance. The erasure was a profound professional insult. It triggered the anxiety I always carried, the fear that my invisible, detailed work would never truly be valued by the visible leaders. Next came the renaming. In the company-wide newsletter, my department, formerly Strategic Rights Management, was listed under Operational Support. We were moved on the organizational chart from reporting directly to the Chief Operating Officer to reporting to the Chief Financial Officer. It was a silent demotion, stripping us of our agency and turning us into a line item on a budget spreadsheet. We were no longer proactive strategists. We were a cost center. I was effectively sealed off from the true power structure. But the real insult, the thing that made my blood run cold, was the presentation deck. The investor showcase was the Super Bowl of our fiscal year. It was where we would unveil Project Meridian to the institutional investors, the private equity groups, the people who moved markets with a text message. For months, I had been building the risk and asset section of that presentation. It was 40 slides of airtight due diligence, mapped out with color-coded risk assessments and mitigation strategies. It proved that we were not just buying content, we were buying an ironclad monopoly, conditional on my waivers. 2 weeks before the showcase, I logged into the shared drive to check a figure regarding the European distribution rights. My file was gone. In its place was a file named Meridian Pitch Final Version 2 Brad Point X. I opened it. My 40 slides of rigorous analysis had been replaced by three slides covered in stock photos of smiling families watching television and buzzwords like synergy, frictionless ecosystem, and infinite scale. There was no mention of the licensing expirations, no mention of the territorial lockouts, and, most dangerously, there was a slide claiming we had 100% global perpetuity rights. On the entire catalog, we did not have 100% global perpetuity rights. We had about 60% conditional rights, pending the signatures I had not given yet. This slide was not optimism, it was fraud. A clear, verifiable, illegal lie designed to secure massive investment under false pretenses. Brad was not just taking my credit, he was creating a liability time bomb that would explode directly in my face if the deal went through. I sat there staring at the screen, the silence of my office amplifying the humming of the air conditioning system. My hand hovered over the phone. I should call legal. I should call my former colleague Vivian, but calling them now would be seen as an internal panic, a self-serving attempt to sabotage the new CEO. If the deal went through on these lies and the rights issues exploded later, Brad would blame clerical errors in my department. He would claim he was given bad information. He would take the bonus, and I would take the subpoena. Brad was setting me up to be the fall guy. The realization extinguished the last flicker of loyalty I had to the company leadership. I did not delete his file. I did not storm into his office. That would be an emotional mistake. I opened my email and created a very specific forwarding rule: forward all emails containing Meridian or rights to my private encrypted external server. I needed an unimpeachable record of events. Then, I opened the master contract database interface. The screen was clunky and gray, looking like it was built in Windows 95. It was the unsexy heart of the company. I navigated to the User Permissions tab. Brad had view-only access. I, as the Director of Rights and Strategic Licensing, had administrator access. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the calculated, grim look of a demolition expert checking the wiring one last time. I had all the evidence I needed, and crucially, I still held the keys to the castle. My insurance policy was locked and loaded. With my evidence archived and Brad confident he had sidelined me, I became a ghost in my own office. I attended the meetings I was still invited to, sitting in the back and taking copious notes in a black Moleskine notebook. When Brad made eye contact, I offered a bland, subservient nod. I let him think he had broken me, that I was just happy to still have a paycheck. But while he was picking out the font size for his lies, I was auditing the architecture of his destruction. You have to understand how intellectual property rights work at this scale. It is not like buying a car where you hand over a check and receive a title. It is a living, breathing organism. It has expiration dates, renewal clauses, and performance stipulations. I spent my nights at home, a glass of Pinot Noir on the desk, cross-referencing the master agreements with the digital license keys. I was searching for the smoking gun, the definitive leverage that resided entirely in the technical infrastructure I managed. And there it was. The acquisition relied heavily on OR's key man clause, buried in the software licensing agreements. Years ago, when we first digitized the library, the proprietary encryption software, the code that actually allowed the content to be streamed, was licensed to me personally as the designated AI's technical steward. It was a quirky, legacy arrangement from when the company was a startup, and I was the only one who understood the inner workings of the system. No one had ever bothered to update it, because no one ever looked that deep into the back end. The clause explicitly stated that in the event of a merger or acquisition, the administrative keys to the content management system, the CMS, must be manually transferred by the designated technical steward. Failure to transfer those keys within 48 hours of closing results in an automatic system lock to prevent unauthorized distribution. I checked the metadata. My name Bruce T. Status active. Brad did not know this clause existed because he had never read the tech stack contracts. He thought the rights were just words on paper. He did not realize they were physically hard-coded into the servers. I now knew that the entire content library's availability was dependent on a digital function tied to my name. 2 days before the showcase, an automated alert popped up on my desktop. Brad had tried to access the master rights database with his standard credentials. Access denied. I watched the log in real time. He tried again and again. Then he tried to reset the password. The system response was automated: contact administrator Bruce T. He did not contact me. Instead, 5 minutes later, I received a Slack message from Kevin, our director of IT, a guy I had shared lunch with for a decade. Bruce, the message read, Brad's asking for admin rights to the rights database. Says he wants to clean up the dashboard for the presentation. Should I grant it? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was it. If Kevin gave him access, Brad could theoretically clumsily delete the safeguards, or at the very least, lock me out, voiding my entire insurance plan. The stakes were suddenly immediate and tactical. I typed back, meticulously citing company policy. Per company policy, section 4.2.2, admin access requires a certified IP handling certification due to liability insurance requirements. Does Brad have that certification? I knew he did not. You had to take a 40-hour course to get it. Kevin's response was immediate. No, he definitely does not. I gave him the exact wording he needed to deny the request without implicating me. Okay, tell him it is a compliance issue and you cannot override it without board approval. We cannot void our insurance policy right before a major sale, Kevin. It's non-negotiable. Solid point. Kevin replied, denying request. He is going to be furious. I leaned back in my chair. Let him be furious. I had just welded the door shut. Brad was going into that presentation blind, deaf, and dumb, armed only with a PowerPoint full of lies and a smile that was about to get very expensive. The physical security of the entire asset was now locked behind my credentials. The trap was set. The feeling was a cold, powerful sense of resolve, the grim satisfaction of knowing that my meticulous attention to detail had become the ultimate corporate defense. The system lockdown had bought me time, forcing Brad to rage impotently in the vacuum I had created. He was still smiling in the hallways, but the effort was visible. His confidence was fraying around the edges, like cheap tweed. I knew he was growing desperate, but I had expected my next move to be tactical, legal, and quiet. The universe, however, had a funny way of balancing the scales, usually right when you think gravity has stopped working. 2 days before the investor showcase, my desk phone rang. It was not an internal extension. It was a 212 area code, New York. I answered, keeping my voice professional. This is Bruce. Bruce, this is Marcus Sterling, General Counsel for the Omni Group. The Omni Group. The lead investors, the people funding this entire circus. Marcus Sterling was a shark, but he was a shark who respected the ocean's depth. We had sparred over contract language for months, and we had developed a dry, mutual respect based solely on my competence. Hello, Marcus, I said. To what do I owe the pleasure? I thought we had finalized the red lines. We have? Marcus said, his voice gravelly and serious. But I am looking at the agenda for Thursday's showcase in Los Angeles. I see Brad is leading the presentation. I do not see your name on the docket. My heart gave a faint stutter, a nervous tremor I quickly suppressed. That is correct, Marcus. Brad felt a higher-level overview was more appropriate for this stage. I chose my words carefully, avoiding any sign of bitterness. Marcus did not mince words. We are not buying a high-level overview, Bruce. We are buying a rights library. I have specific, detailed questions about the derivative clauses for the Asian markets and the legacy sync issues. Frankly, Brad does not know a derivative clause from a dinner menu. If I ask him, he is going to sweat through his suit and lie to me. I do not like being lied to. The truth delivered externally had never sounded so validating. This was the first time someone in power had openly acknowledged my value against Brad's superficiality. The idea of being dragged into the spotlight still triggered that deep-seated fear of exposure, but it was offset by a powerful sense of validation. I understand, Marcus, I replied, my voice steady now. I am calling Brad in 5 minutes. Marcus continued, I am telling him that if our team is flying out there, you are presenting the IP diligence. Non-negotiable. If you are not on that stage, we do not sign. Clear. A powerful, cold warmth spread through my chest. It was the grim satisfaction of a soldier being handed their rifle. I was being forced onto the battlefield, but I had been given the authority to dictate the terms of engagement. Clear, I confirmed. Good. See you in L.A., Bruce. Wear the armor. He hung up abruptly. Exactly 9 minutes later, Brad stormed into my office. He looked like he had swallowed a lemon whole. He did not bother with pleasantries or knocking. Change of plans, he snapped, not looking me in the eye. The Omni team wants a deep dive on the legal minutiae. They are obsessive. He paced the length of my small office. So, I am going to let you do a tight 5 minutes. 5 minutes, Bruce, tops, no exceptions. Keep it high level. Do not bore them. Of course, Brad, I said, turning my chair to face him fully. Do you want me to use your slides? The ones with the 100% ownership figures. His eyes darted nervously around the room, avoiding my gaze. He was suddenly worried about the truth, but only because an important client was forcing the issue. Yes, stick to the script. Do not bore them with the exceptions. Just reinforce the confidence. Sell the vision. Sell the vision. I repeated neutrally. He leaned in, his heavy sandalwood cologne overpowering the smell of my tea. And Bruce, do not embarrass me. This is my deal. You are just here to check a box. I met his eyes, allowing him to see only bland subservience. I understand perfectly, Brad. He left as quickly as he arrived. I was being thrust back into visibility, the very thing my imposter syndrome dreaded. But the external demand from Marcus had given me cover. Brad was setting me up to lie, but Marcus had set me up to tell the truth. This was no longer just about self-preservation. It was a matter of professional morality. I was going to use those 5 minutes to do what Brad feared most: expose the facts. The fight was no longer silent. It was about to go very public. Brad's demand for a tight 5 minutes, and his explicit instruction to sell the vision, was a command to Lee, a direct challenge to the professional integrity I valued above all else. I could not edit Brad's final pitch file on the server. He had locked it, afraid someone would strip away his buzzwords. But I could create my own presentation, and I spent that night, the night before the showcase, working from my kitchen island. I did not sleep. I did not pace. I pulled up the information I had meticulously archived on my private server. My new deck was not flashy. It was black text on a white background. It was a forensic autopsy of Brad's lies, stripped bare of color and corporate marketing. The purpose was not persuasion, but inoculation. Slide 1 presented the true reality of ownership, a detailed graph showing conditional rights versus perpetuity claims. Slide 2 dissected that there is $50 million liability gap we would instantly inherit if we triggered the change of control clause without the necessary waivers. It was a financial bullet point that even a high-level executive like Brad could not ignore, and which investors like Marcus Sterling would certainly appreciate. Slide 3 detailed the precise technical trigger, the C licensing key clause, tied to my designation as the technical steward. I saved the file, not to the company network, but to a sleek silver USB drive that I attached to my keychain. My insurance policy was now physical, immediate, and entirely outside the corporate architecture Brad controlled. Then I practiced. I stood in front of the window, rehearsing the presentation to the dark street outside, watching my own reflection. I systematically stripped all emotion from my voice. There was no anger, no sarcasm, no hint of the resentment I felt. My delivery had to be utterly neutral, purely objective data. I had to be a mirror reflecting their own incompetence back at them. The moment I showed fear or emotion, Brad would seize on it and dismiss me as disgruntled or unstable. This was no longer about saving the company. It was about saving my reputation. If I stood on that stage and parodied Brad's lies, I was complicit in fraud. My internal struggle with imposter syndrome faded, replaced by the grim certainty that telling the truth, no matter how explosive, was the only morally and legally viable path. The night before the meeting, I stood on the balcony of my hotel room in downtown Los Angeles, looking at the city lights. I thought about the 5 years I had given the company, the missed social events, the late nights, the stress-induced focus that led to my nickname, Compliance Boy. I accepted the stakes. If I told the truth, I was a traitor in the eyes of my CEO and the board he controlled. But in the world of rights and licensing, there is no treason. There is only what is signed, what is not, and the legal consequences of those omissions. I was ready to face the consequences. I went to bed at 10 o'clock that night. I slept soundly. I had accepted the inevitability of the fight. The feeling was a quiet, cold determination, the absolute peace that comes from making a difficult, ethical decision. My panic over public exposure was overridden by the professional imperative to speak the facts. I knew this choice would lead to my termination, but it would also lead to the exposure of Brad's reckless fraud. I was prepared for both. The conference room was on the 45th floor, floating above the smog of Los Angeles like a spaceship. One wall was entirely glass, offering a panoramic view of the sprawling city, but nobody was looking outside. The air inside was recycled and expensive, smelling of leather chairs, fresh coffee, and anxiety. Having spent the night solidifying my resolve, I felt a strange, cold calm as I took my seat. At the center of the long mahogany table sat the Omni Group team. Marcus Sterling was there, looking like a statue carved out of granite, flanked by 3 junior associates who typed on laptops with terrifying speed. On our side was Brad, the chief financial officer, 2 vice presidents of nothing in particular, and me. I sat at the far end of the table, my hands folded on top of my closed laptop. I wore a charcoal suit sharp enough to cut glass. I did not look at Brad. I looked only at the investors. Brad stood at the head of the room, clicking through his slides. He was in full salesman mode, animated, passionate, and already sweating slightly through his expensive dress shirt. "We are looking at a paradigm shift," Brad announced, gesturing to a slide that showed a rocket ship taking off. Literally a clip art rocket ship. Project Meridian is not just an acquisition. It is a colonization of the media landscape. You are capturing 100% of the market share in our vertical. Marcus Sterling did not blink. He just tapped his pen once on his notepad. "And the IP?" Marcus asked, his voice cutting through Brad's monologue. "The underlying rights. We have heard rumors of fragmentation in the catalog noise," Brad said, waving his hand dismissively. "Just noise from the competition. We have total control. But hey, do not take my word for it. I have brought our technical specialist, Bruce, to give you the thumbs up." He gestured to me like he was introducing a magician's assistant. "Bruce, why do not you walk them through the clearance stats? Keep it high level." The room turned to me, the weight of 20 eyes instantly focusing on my spot at the end of the table. The sudden, forced exposure triggered a spike of panic, but I immediately anchored myself to the data on my USB drive. I stood up. I did not walk to the podium. I stayed at my spot at the end of the table. I did not plug my laptop in the projector. I did not need the screen. "Thank you, Brad," I said. My voice was quiet, but in the acoustically perfect room, it carried with chilling clarity. "I think it is important we clarify the definition of total control." Brad's fixed smile faltered slightly. "Just the numbers, Bruce. High level. The numbers," I continued, making direct eye contact with Marcus Sterling, "are as follows. Of the 12,000 assets listed in the Meridian acquisition, 4,500 are currently encumbered by third-party liens." I paused, letting the figure sink in. "Another 3,000 have territorial restrictions that exclude distribution in the European Union and China. Our two target growth markets." The quiet typing on the Omni Group side stopped completely. The silence was sudden and absolute. "Furthermore," I said, locking eyes with Marcus, "the slide titled 100% perpetuity is factually incorrect. The master agreement stipulates that rights revert to the original creators upon any change of control unless specific waivers are signed by the director of licensing. Those waivers have not been signed." Brad's face went from tan to a sickly shade of gray. "Bruce," he said, a desperate warning tone creeping in, "I think you are confusing the old data with the new projections. I am citing the contracts currently stored on our central server, Brad," I said. "The ones you cannot read because you do not have admin access." "Okay, that is enough," Brad sputtered. He actually stepped forward, physically imposing himself between me and the investors. He was breathing heavily, his veneer of control completely gone. "I cannot listen to this nonsense. Bruce is clearly unprepared and working off outdated spreadsheets. We will handle the legal deep dive offline." I looked directly past him at the AV technician in the corner. I did not move. 5 minutes into my investor pitch, the CEO cut my mic. Brad's voice rose to a harsh, "Strange shout! I cannot listen to this nonsense!" he barked. Nervous laughter spread among our internal vice presidents, taking their cue from the boss. The atmosphere was excruciating. This was the moment where the troublemaker is supposed to shrink away, embarrassed, defeated. I did not shrink. I calmly closed my laptop. The click of the lid latch sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. I looked at Brad, then at Marcus Sterling, and gave a small, polite nod. The client's lawyer stood up, his gaze fixed on the now silent spot where I stood. "Where is his voice? He is the one who owns the rights." The CEO went pale. The investors stood and walked out. I was no longer speaking, but the truth was louder than ever. After Brad cut my microphone and I closed my laptop, I did the only thing left to do. I walked out. I did not storm. I did not look back. I walked out the double glass doors, past the reception desk, and toward the elevators. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands were steady. I pressed the down button. Inside the room, I knew Brad was already spinning it. He would be claiming I was unstable, a disgruntled employee, or having a breakdown. But I knew something he did not. I knew who was in that room, and I knew that Marcus Sterling did not fly across the country to watch the only person who understood the asset get silenced. The elevator did not come immediately. It was one of those high-speed smart elevators that took its time calculating the optimal route. So I stood there in the lobby, staring back at the glass-walled conference room. It was like watching a silent movie. I saw Brad turn back to the mahogany table, his smile plastered back on, his hands spread wide, a desperate theatrical gesture. He pointed at the screen, trying to restart his momentum, but nobody was looking at the screen. I saw Marcus Sterling slowly stand up. He did not look at Brad. He looked at the empty chair where I had been sitting. Even through the thick, soundproof glass, I could see the energy in the room shift. It was not a drift, it was a landslide. Marcus said something. He gestured to the door, my door. Brad froze. He looked like a deer in headlights. If the deer were wearing a $5,000 suit and realizing it was about to become roadkill. Then Marcus reached into his briefcase, pulled out a folder. I recognized it. It was the due diligence packet I had sent him weeks ago, the real one. He slammed it onto the mahogany table. I could almost hear the thud. The other investors stood up. It was a domino effect. One suit, then another, then another. They were packing their bags. Brad was frantic now. I saw him grab at an investor's arm, a cardinal sin in that world. The investor shook him off with a look of pure disgust. Then, the heavy glass doors of the conference room burst open. Bruce, it was Marcus. He strode into the lobby, ignoring the panicked vice presidents trailing him like ducklings. Brad was right behind him, his face a mask of red, blotchy panic. Marcus, please. He is a disgruntled employee. Brad pleaded, his voice cracking, is trying to sabotage the deal for leverage. We have the rights. Marcus stopped. He turned to Brad. He was a tall man, and he used every inch of it. You cut his microphone, Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. You silenced the only person in this entire building who understands the asset you are trying to sell us, because he told the truth. He was lying. Brad squealed. The deck. I have his deck. And I have yours, Marcus interrupted, holding up the folder. Yours is a fantasy, Brad. His is a liability report, and quite frankly, if he is not the one holding the pen, we are not interested in the paper. Marcus turned to me. The lobby was dead silent. The receptionist had stopped typing. The elevator finally dinged, the door sliding open behind me. Bruce, Marcus said, if you are walking away, we are walking with you. I looked at Brad. He was breathing hard, sweat beading on his upper lip. He looked small. I felt a powerful rush of catharsis, the total validation of my professional choice. I stepped fully into the light. I am on leave, Marcus, I said calmly. Effective immediately. All inquiries regarding the IP transfer can be directed to the acting chief executive officer, Brad Miller. I gestured to Brad. Good luck finding the encryption keys, Brad. They are 256-bit. I think there is a brute force tutorial on YouTube. I stepped into the elevator. Marcus gave me a grim nod, the kind one warrior gives another after a kill. As the doors closed, the last thing I saw was Brad standing alone in the lobby, surrounded by the departing investors, holding a laser pointer that pointed at absolutely nothing. The ride down took 40 seconds. It was the most peaceful 40 seconds of my professional life. By the time my Uber pulled up to my apartment complex, my phone was vibrating so hard I thought it might shatter. 17 missed calls from Brad, 4 from human resources, 12 from random numbers I assumed were board members. The stock market, I knew, was already reacting to the news. The Omni Group's walkout had triggered massive panic. I walked into my apartment, kicked off my shoes, and turned my phone to Do Not Disturb. The next step was the lock. I opened my laptop one last time to set my out-of-office auto-reply, triggering the final part of my insurance plan. Subject automatic reply Bruce T. Body I am currently out of the office on an indefinite leave of absence for all matters regarding Project Meridian IP clearance and strategic licensing. Please contact Chief Executive Officer Brad Miller. Note: administrative access to the Central Rights Database remains with the designated technical steward. For transfer of credentials, please refer to the change of control clause in your employment agreement. I hit save. The fallout was instantaneous. Without me to physically sign in and initiate the transfer protocols, the system had gone into defense mode as per the keyman clause. Database locked down. The content library, the actual movies and shows they were trying to sell, went dark. The servers had detected a potential hostile takeover, which, ironically, Brad was conducting, and severed the external links. The entire platform they were demoing to the world was now displaying a 4004 error. The asset, without my keys, was nothing but digital noise. The fallout was faster than expected. Corporate disasters usually take days to metabolize, but the immediate collapse of the Meridian deal took hours. The Omni Group's walkout, combined with the 404 error message where the content library should have been, triggered panic selling. The stock plummeted 40% in 24 hours. Brad, predictable in his desperation, went on a public relations offensive. He issued a statement saying I was terminated for gross insubordination and attempted data hostage-taking. He threatened legal action. That was his final mistake. You do not threaten the person who wrote the contracts with legal action. I contacted Vivian Miller, my retired general counsel friend. She connected me with a sharp lawyer who, within an hour, sent a simple letter to the board of directors. The letter attached the original technical steward agreement, which explicitly stated that the steward, me, had the right to withhold keys if they believed the integrity of the assets was compromised. Brad had compromised the integrity by lying to investors. I was legally obligated to lock him out. I was not a hostage taker. I was a fiduciary acting in defense of the asset. I spent the next 3 days deliberately slowing down. I planted hydrangeas. I repotted my succulents. I did not check my email. Every time my phone vibrated, the voicemails from Brad had changed tone. Day 1 was anger. Pick up the phone, or I will sue you into poverty. Day 2 was bargaining. Bruce, look, we can work this out. Just come in and unlock the server. Day 3 was desperation. Please, the stock is down 15%. They are going to fire me. Just tell me the password. I deleted them without listening to the end. I was just following the rules, and for the first time in my career, the rules were working for me, not for the system. On Monday morning, I put a new suit on, navy blue, the color of quiet authority. I was not going to my old office. I was going to a cafe in Santa Monica, 3 blocks from the ocean. Sitting at a corner table, nursing an espresso, was Alina Artova. She was the chief executive officer of Streamline, our biggest competitor. Alina was everything Brad was not: calculated, brilliant, and famously ruthless about talent acquisition. She did not stand up when I arrived. She just gestured to the chair opposite her. Bruce, she said, her accent faint but sharp. You have caused quite a stir. Brad looks like he has aged 10 years in a week. Brad has a stressful job, I said, sitting down. Managing expectations is difficult indeed. Alina took a sip of her coffee. My sources tell me the Meridian deal is dead. Omni Group pulled the term sheet this morning. They also tell me, she continued, her eyes locking onto mine, that you are the only person who actually understands the licensing architecture of that library, and that without you, the library is just a pile of digital noise. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was not a resume. It was a schematic chart of a new licensing framework I had designed in my head over the last 6 months, one that solved the cross-border rights issues that everyone said were impossible. I did not steal the IP over to them, Alina, I said. The methodology, the structural logic for the clearance engine, that is my IP. I licensed it to them for use. The license expires upon my termination. Alina raised an eyebrow. She picked up the paper and scanned it for 10 seconds. Then she smiled genuinely. You created a dependency they did not even know existed. I created a safety net. I corrected. They turned it into a noose. Alina put the paper down. I do not want to buy their library, Bruce. It is toxic now. But I want to buy the architect. We are building a new global tier. I need a chief strategy officer. Partner, I corrected. Equity partner, and I bring my own legal team. Alina did not hesitate. She extended her hand. Doan. We shook hands. It was firm, real, and based entirely on mutual respect for competence. That afternoon, I sent my official resignation letter to the board of directors. It was 2 sentences long. To the board, I hereby resign from my position effective immediately as my employment has ended. Usage license for the Thorn clearance protocol is hereby revoked. I signed it simply. Bruce, I did not steal anything. I did not hack anything. I just took my ball and went home. The fact that the ball happened to be the engine of their entire car was no longer my problem. The collapse was a structural failure. Without the clearance protocols, the liability insurance was voided. Without insurance, the bank loans were recalled. I settled into my new office at Streamline. It was bigger. And most importantly, it had a door that locked. My phone rang. It was Marcus Sterling. "Congratulations on the new post, Bruce," he said. "Streamline. Good fit." "Thanks, Marcus. It feels stable. We are looking for a new home for our capital," Marcus said, his voice casual. "Brad's ship is sinking. We need a vessel that actually has a captain. Alina tells me you are running the rights division there now." "I am." "Then we are interested. I will have my team send over the term sheet." "But Bruce." "Yes. Make sure you are the one presenting." I laughed. I would not have it any other way. We closed the Omni Group deal yesterday, $200 million. I signed the contract with my own pen. As for Brad, I heard about his final board meeting from Kevin, the IT director who I hired at Streamline 2 weeks later. Apparently, Brad walked into the boardroom expecting a severance package. He walked into a firing squad. The board asked him one question: "Why did you cut the microphone?" He tried to blame me. He tried to blame the market. He tried to blame the SVIB, but nobody was listening. The investors had walked out on him. Now the board was following suit. They fired him for cause. No golden parachute, no stock options, just a cardboard box and an escort out of the building. He thought silence was a weapon he could use against me. He thought if he took away my voice, I would disappear. He forgot that in the world of contracts, the most dangerous things are not the words spoken into a microphone. The most dangerous things are the words written in the silence, the clauses you do not read, and the people you do not see. He cut my microphone, and in doing so, he handed me the loudest megaphone in the world.